Hey everybody, today is Monday, November 7th, 2022. Coming up on the show today, from Black Adam, editor Mike Sale.
You know, we took some criticism for it a little bit, but we also entertained a lot of people with this style. First of all, let me say something. Me, Mike Sale, AC, I would love an R-rated Black Adam movie, personally. I like those kind of movies. When I got called to edit Black Adam, my very first reaction was, yeah, I want to do that. My second reaction was, why are they calling me?
Yes, all that and lots more on this edition of The Rough Cut. Well, hello, my friends. Hello, fans of editing, post-production, and I guess all things filmmaking. Good to have you on board today. Got another fun show for you. Last week, we went small, in terms of budget and production size, that is, with the indie film American Murderer. And we had a real nice talk with the director and editor about what it's like making an indie film in 2022. This week, we're going big again. How big? Gabby Hayes big. You get me. Yes, we are talking about the latest entry in the DC Extended Universe, Black Adam, starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Of course, it is not out of the ordinary for us to be talking about superhero movies, Marvel or DC, here on the podcast, when you consider how incredibly popular they are. But usually when we do talk to editors of these movies, it is not their first time doing them. That is not the case today. And while editor Mike Sale has quite a list of credits to his name, including big action movies, this is his first true comic book / superhero kind of movie. For an editor, should that be any different from any other kind of movie? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, but it'll be fun to find out. I just mentioned that Mike has done action movies before, and he certainly has, including ones with Dwayne Johnson like Red Notice, Skyscraper, and Central Intelligence. But he's also done a lot of comedies like We're the Millers, Bridesmaids, and The Hangover II. So you can just tell from that list of movies he's going to be fun. So I don't want to make you wait much longer to hear from him, but really quick, before we do, I want to talk with you, like I always do, about the best way you can ensure that your next TV show or movie, superhero or otherwise, sounds absolutely amazing. And of course, that is with a little help from our friends and sponsor, Extreme Music. Since 1997, they've been the ones film and TV makers have turned to for the very best in production audio. So you would be a very smart film and TV maker to get on over to extrememusic.com for your next project, where you can explore their vast catalog of production music from the best of the best. Names like Quincy Jones, Michael Giacchino, Hans Zimmer. The best, I tell you. All you got to do is hit their search engine for things like instrumentation, genre, speed, vocals, era, mood, composer, and any other thoughts that come to mind. The tracks you get back from that search are available in different links with whatever instrumentation you need. You can even search for music that sounds like a track you give to them. All of that incredible power in one simple-to-use website where you can do all the licensing online or get a little help from one of their reps at an office nearest to you. So the next time you need the best production audio out there, check out extrememusic.com. Okay, time to get this show going and meet today's special guest. From Black Adam, here is editor Mike Sale. That's always a smart thing to do. There but for the grace of God, Michael. But I'm glad to be talking to you now, and we got a lot to talk about if you're up for it.
Sure.
In doing my research about you, it appears most of your feature career has been in comedies. There's definitely some action as well, but even those I think would mostly be action comedies. So you would appear to be a kind of a first-timer in the superhero movie editing club. You know, I talked to a lot of editors about cutting superhero movies just because there's just so many of them. But I don't think I've ever talked to one before when it was their first time cutting one. With this kind of thing, animatics, storyboards, previs, I don't think they had mocap suits and Bridesmaids, but, with this experience relatively fresh in your mind, what is different about working on a superhero movie for you? And did you have to learn any new skills or sharpen any pre-existing ones for Black Adam?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question, and it's a very astute observation. And I have to tell you, when I got called to edit Black Adam, my very first reaction was, yeah, I want to do that. My second reaction was, why are they calling me? Because it seemed like an odd choice to me, right, on the surface. But I have done, it's my fourth movie with Dwayne, and I know the producers. The thing is, there is comedy in Black Adam. But more importantly, the secret to making comedies work is character building. And so in Black Adam, what they had is a situation where they were introducing a lot of new characters. So the main reason they wanted to bring me in is help with the character building. And the comedy part doesn't hurt because they have somebody who also knows how to balance comedy and action. So we also already had on the team John Lee, and John has a very unbelievable comic book background, right? Some of the biggest comic book movies ever. So the thing to remember is they weren't just picking me, they were putting together a team of people to do it. So from my part, yeah, it was different. I have done visual effects movies for a long time. Believe it or not, like 20 years ago, Nutty to the Clumps had like a crazy amount of visual effects in it, yeah. Right? And then we did Skyscraper, which wasn't really a comedy, but it had the building was digital, the fire was digital, everything was digital. So in terms of understanding how to work with previs, post-vis, how to deal with visual effects, how to cut when things aren't there, I had already done that several times, but not on a comic book movie. So for me, probably the biggest difference is like patience, because, in a comedy, you sort of have all your footage, and in 10 weeks, you can, if you're good, make a cut of the movie that's pretty good, right? Like it looks like a movie, it sounds like a movie, it feels like a movie, and you can go show it to 100 people and you'll get a reaction of 100 people who think they're watching a movie. You might have a rough scene in a car with green screens or something, but basically you can tell how the movie played and you can test it. But with this kind of movie that has, over probably 3,000 visual effects or something. Like we had whole reels that were all visual effects, every single shot. What you have to do is have discipline and patience, because your brain wants you to cut things out that you might need later on, right? Because it's just a drawing. And so you don't have the emotional reaction that you may have. Or if you go do a test, an audience might not understand what they're looking at or how that's going to feel. So the biggest thing for me was like watching the movie over and over again in my imagination. Like sometimes I just take a freeze frame of Hawkman that was completed and I'd put it picture in picture in the shot, so that in my brain I could be like, it's going to look like this, it's going to look like this, it's going to look like this. And that was a very different experience. But I have learned doing the other films that like you want to hold on to every frame for as long as you can, because, sometimes you have these brilliant visual effects people and the shot comes in and you're like, why did I shorten that? That thing's awesome. I want every frame. Can we have more? That kind of thing.
You just gave me so much in that answer that I want to revisit, but I'll take it piece by piece.
Sure.
As you said, this is your fourth film with Dwayne Johnson, and the other three you did with him, and again, I'm just going, this is courtesy of IMDb, but were directed by Ross and Marshall Thurber, someone else you've worked with 4 times.
Yes.
But he's not the director here for Black Adam. And you already talked about, why are they calling me? So there's no connection there via the director that I can see. Therefore, the question is, how was it that you got the gig? Was it your agent or was it The Rock?
It's probably not Dwayne. I've met Dwayne a couple times. I love Dwayne. And by the way, in real life, Dwayne is better than the Dwayne you see on social media. Like he's even a better person. He makes you want to work 110% all the time. It's amazing. He's an amazing guy. The call came from the producers, Beau Flynn, who runs Flynn Picture Co. And we had done a couple movies together. We had worked together on Red Notice just right before Black Adam. And then also New Line. If you look, I've worked for them a lot. I did We're the Millers with them and a couple other projects, some of them with Rawson, some of them without Rawson. So basically, they came up with the idea for Mike Sale, ACE, to join Black Adam. And, I was very comfortable because it was 2 groups of people I had worked with several times before. And I do like to work with people that I've worked for before, because each movie takes a year at least. And it's important to me whom I'm working with. I am in a position where I can choose a little bit projects and a little bit people I work with. And so I like to work with people that I like to work with.
So I'm always curious to hear about that initial meeting between editor and director. Even though you got the call from the producers, there's still got to be a little bit of an interview process with the director.
Yeah, totally. It was, basically, first of all, from my side, like I had, read the script and loved it. I mean, just loved it. I've waited a long time to do a comic book movie because I wanted to do one I really, really could get into. So the anti-hero thing, like being a child of the 70s, that was right in my wheelhouse. I was like, yes, I want to do this. If you notice, can be difficult to grasp on my resume or what I'm usually picking. but I'm often picking movies that are a little edgy in some way or a little uncomfortable in some way, even if it's just for me. Like, I like to grow. I like to learn. I don't want to make the same cookie over and over again, right? Like, I want to keep pushing and trying different things. So I was like amped up for the interview with Jama. Like, I wore like all black the day of the interview.
Black Mike.
It was a Zoom meeting, right? And I was like, Jama, I'm so into this. And he was like, okay, settle down. But it was a Zoom meeting. You know, he was in somewhere, might have already been in Atlanta prepping. And, you know, he was like, had a black baseball hat and a hoodie. And it was kind of hard. I'm like, is this going well? But as we talked, we really had a connection over the script and what we liked about the script and what we were concerned about with the script. And so way back in whenever that was, April, I think of 2021, I mean, when they were shooting, we were discussing like, well, if this doesn't work, what will we do? And we were already talking about some of the things that we might move around and try, which a lot of them actually ended up in the movie that way.
Well, I'm definitely going to want to get back to the things that you were concerned about and the things you moved around, because I have those questions here on the page. Do you go study the Shazam movie or Suicide Squad for any sort of backstory, as distant as it might be?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I am fortunate in that I'm an editor who has been able to remain a movie fan. So I've been a big movie fan since I was a little kid. I worked at a movie theater when I was 14 years old, cleaning up the theater. Mainly so I could get into R-rated movies. The manager was like, if you work here, you can come to the staff screenings. And I was like, okay. You know, I think it was Animal House that pushed me over the edge. We couldn't get in, right? Like, we were 14 and we wanted to see John Belushi. And, you know, for 6 years or so, I got up every Saturday and Sunday at 6:30 in the morning and went and cleaned movie theaters. And I got to see an amazing amount of movies. One of the ones was the 1978 Superman. So I actually come at comic book stuff not so much from the comic book side, but from the products of the TV shows and the movies. So like, I was a huge fan of the Superman movies, of course, the Batman movies, Tim Burton Batman, and then Christopher Nolan Batman. And like, so I watch all those things, and Marvel too. My wife and we love to watch them. So I'm certainly not an expert, but I had a pretty solid background on that stuff because I do like to watch them. But with Black Adam, he was a lesser known character. So I did have to do some research. I actually bought some comic books, some vintage ones that because I wanted to see like where the roots were. So I went on eBay and did that stuff. I got some T-shirts. I got a Black Adam T-shirt. I got a Dr. Fate T-shirt. I remember one day before I was even on the movie, I just wore my Dr. Fate T-shirt to the hardware store, and the person checking me out was like, Dr. Fate, man, that's a cool shirt. I was like, this is going to be a great movie. But additionally, on this particular movie, Jama did a tremendous amount of research for the movie, and he has some kind of encyclopedia memory. So seriously, like, I had like between John Lee and Jama, like the greatest database of Black Adam movie and what it means, that's like at my access all the time. Additionally, I have a friend of the family's, I'll just call him Jeremy, who is a super duper comic book nerd. Sometimes at night, I would send him a little message on Facebook. I couldn't tell him anything, but I could say, dude, tell me everything you know about Hawkman. And like, I wake up in the morning and there'd be like, there'd be like 47 texts about Hawkman, and I'd go, well, that's a beautiful story. So I did some research before I got there, but the research continued all throughout the project.
Well, man, I hope Jeremy got a credit.
Jeremy got better than a credit. I brought Jeremy to the premiere in New York City, and he got to come to the premiere and the after party with me. He was my guest.
Nice. Good for you, Jeremy. You talked about the experience you've had in action and said, listen, it's not really all that different doing a superhero comic book movie than it is doing something like Skyscraper or Clumps or something like that. But for films of this nature, are you involved earlier on in the pre-production more so than you might be on a normal comedy or drama?
You could be sometimes, but in this one I wasn't because I was finishing Red Notice. Plus, before I came on, Jama had worked with previs company. And in that previs company, they had an editor. His name is Christian. And we did something very unique on this movie, which I love. And I would hope to do it on more movies. So Christian and Jama worked for a year on the previs action sequences because of the pandemic. So, normally that's a couple months, but they got to work on for a year. So one of the things I got to see before I took the movie is they had all these previs sections, the battle in the desert when he kills the intergang army, the fight with the JSA, the flybike sequence, many of them, right, were like crazy, like the best previses you've ever seen in your life because they were working on it for so long. And I watched those and I was like, I don't know who these people are, but I want to work with them. Like, you just watch them. I'm like, this is so cool. But the thing we did that was unique and was great is Jama kept Christian actually on the set while he was shooting. And he brought Christian, we kept him as an additional editor during post. So usually there's a big disconnect between the previs people and post-production, right? Because we don't normally work with those. So not only did Christian, the previs editor, stay, but also our previs people called Day for Night stayed on and became our post-viz people. So we had this great continuity through the piece. And then what would happen is we would cut stuff, and then I would say to Christian, did you guys ever try a version where you did this? And he'd go, I'll pull it up for you. And he'd dig deep into his thing and he'd pull it up and I could see it and either go, oh, I see why they moved on. Or I would go, hey, Jama, maybe like this was cool. And we would keep pushing and progressing and elevating the sequences. Or maybe, sometimes I would have an idea. I would go, okay, like we need an action hero beat for Smasher and Cyclone. And then Christian would meet with they were now post-viz group, and they would make a bunch of beats, like maybe 8 of them. And then Jama and I would look and go, okay, let's try to put this into, reel 6, And so having that continuity was different for me. I normally don't get that on the comedy type movies, and it was fantastic.
So in terms of just the practical, tactical aspects of getting ready to edit a major motion picture, what do you do to prep? Once you read the script, you talk to Jama and you agree to do the film with the producers, what do you do next to prepare for it?
I do research. I look at other movies. I do those things. The one thing that was interesting on this movie is I was coming in later in the process, because usually if I come in during dailies, that's when a lot of the prep is happening, right? I'm seeing dailies, I'm reacting to them, I'm looking things up, I'm saying, oh, I should watch this movie, or I should put this movie in the Avid and I see how they cut that scene, or this various things, which I do during dailies a lot. But on this one, I was coming in late to the game. John worked during the dailies and doing the assembly. I came in a couple weeks into the director's cut. And so most of that had to happen later in the process. So I had to really hit the ground running. And John is such a very smart person. And he knew that it would take me a little while to get going. And he knew that he had time because we weren't going to finish this movie last October, right? We knew that it was going to take us a minute to get all this visual effects together and everything. So in September and October and November of last year, I was going through the reels for the first time, cutting stuff, looking at dailies, catching up, doing the research, talking to Jama, talking to John, talking to my secret weapon, and, just learning, right? And learning the material. And I was making some changes. I was doing some stuff with the characters, and I was, thinking about stuff. But it was really in like January, after we sort of got through the assembly version of the movie, the director's cut. It was really in January that Jama was like, okay, dig in. He was like, go rogue, make me any version of this movie you want to make. Like, just do it. Do whatever you want, which was super fun. And so the process in that fall for me, and I'll tell you a little bit, I don't know if other editors do this, but I'll tell you a little bit about my process. I started actually as a little kid performing. I did like local theater and high school theater and those kind of things. And additionally, we had a radio station at my high school, and I would do me and my friends would do comedy shows and different things and sketches and different things. And it was late in that process in high school that cable came and they gave us the local access station and I started editing. And I quickly realized like, oh, I don't have to be the performer. I don't have to be the one that puts my butt up on the stage and fails, right? Like I can kind of be this Wizard of Oz guy behind the curtain. And I really liked it. So my approach to editing is kind of like acting in a way. When I'm editing, the people in the movie become real to me. The world becomes real to me, whatever world that is. And the characters become real to me, but also I'm kind of playing the characters as well in my mind. So when I'm editing Black Adam and I'm thinking about the stuff in my mind, I'm going like, well, what would Black Adam say? How would he say it? Or whomever it is. It could be Cyclone. It could be Dr. Fate. It could be Amy on the TV show Judging Amy. Like, you know, I'm learning her character and I'm having her feelings and I'm thinking those things. So, you know, during the fall, that's a lot of what I was doing is learning like, what do the actors give me in terms of who these characters are and how can I take that and make that amplified? How can I elevate it?
Another editor who talked to me about the importance of, or at least the suggestion that editors should take acting classes because it was all about understanding performances. Other than your high school cable access experience, have you ever done anything like that, or do you agree with that assessment?
I do agree with that. I mean, I think as an editor, you're in the middle of a lot of different art forms. You know, if you think about it, one of the things I love about when schools have like movie and media programs is like in order to make any kind of content, even if it's a TikTok video or whatever it is, you have to utilize like a lot of different forms of art, right? Like, you know, you have to have, you know, usually there's music. You have, you know, wardrobe. So you have fashion. You have, you can have painting and building and sculpting. And, you know, in a movie has every art form. So as a human who's making movies, I try to study all of it, including writing and all the stuff. Have I taken, you know, I don't have like a major at college and all these things, but do I read about it? Do I have books on these things? Have I studied these things? Of course I have. And I'll tell you a really secret book that's really good and translates to editing well. Stephen King wrote a book called On Writing. And it's actually a book about writing, but it's really a book about storytelling, and it applies to editing. Certain sections of it really stuck with me, and I've used throughout my career. Also, I'm a big Stephen King fan, and what I love the most about him is that he's great at building worlds that feel real, characters that feel real, and then he puts them in abnormal situations, but those situations feel real because he makes them feel real. And if you look at the comedies I've worked on, like Superbad, Bridesmaids, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, we're actually doing the same thing. Those aren't horror things, but we're making a world that's real. We stay true to it. We're making characters that feel real and they're interesting. And then in some way, heightened or abnormal things happen to him. In our case, it's funny instead of horrific.
So from the technical standpoint, unique is probably the wrong word, but every editor has their own idiosyncrasies and ways of doing things. Your Avid setup and your working environment, how do you create a comfortable working environment that you can be productive in for months, sometimes even years at a time?
That's actually a great question. I think it's an important question. You know, the main thing that I try to fight for, and I think is really important for a picture editor, is room size. Because the thing is, we're making a big movie, a loud movie, an action movie. And when you're making those things, your senses are kind of assaulted, right? So I really hate to have that all like 8 inches from my face and like speakers on my desk, like pounding at me. So I always like to have a room where the monitor can be bigger and further away, like a movie. And I can have like left, right, and at least center. I actually have had 5:1 editing rooms for our movies that were big enough. And with the subwoofer, because when I'm playing stuff for the director, the producer, you know, in the old days, you know, you would have these little tiny editing rooms that had like a moviola in them back in the old days. And they still have those rooms on the lot. And by the way, they're putting Avid editors in a lot of those rooms, right? like those little rooms. But the thing is, that isn't where directors or producers watch their movie. They had these big, beautiful, nice theaters, and they would go watch their movie in it. But now, a lot of times, the director or producer is seeing the movie for the first time in your Avid room, right? So just for that alone, you need kind of a bigger, more theater-like experience a little bit. I wish I could turn my camera around because I built an editing room in my garage. It's got a 70-inch OLED. It's got 5.1 surround sounds. I actually have a 130-inch movie screen that can pull down and a really, 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 really nice projector where I can actually project stuff. And so those are the type of things I push for. I can't always get it depending on the situation, but I like to have a comfortable room. I call it the creative bubble too. Like you want to be in a place where you feel like the director can be themselves. They can be happy. They can be sad. They can be angry if they are frustrated at making the movie. Like, we want to have all the feelings we can have in my cutting room. It's a creative space and it's like a safe space, right? And when we go on this journey of a movie, there's a lot of emotions that are going to happen over a year, And I want it to be emotions that contribute to making the film better. And so I want the editing room to be a place the director wants to come to. And I want the editing room to be a place the director feels safe in doing or saying anything they want to do. And I want us to be able to have that high five moment where we see something and go, we did it. That's the movie.
Everybody wants that.
Yes.
Well, knowing you have this amazing super edit suite garage at home, the film was shot in Atlanta, and I'm sure John started it in Atlanta, I'm guessing.
Nope, he worked remotely.
So the whole thing was edited remotely?
But when they were in Atlanta, he was editing remotely from I think, at Warner Brothers.
Okay, so that leads me to another frequent question of mine, and that's preference about editing on set or on location versus being remote from the set. Some editors say, I love being there because the camaraderie, I can learn things, I can interact with the director more often. It gives me a head start in my editing. And then other editors say, no, I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to know what went into a shot or a scene. I want to be truly removed from what goes on in production. Where do you fall on that?
Yes, I definitely try to remove myself as much as possible from production. I also try to stay away from the actors as well because I don't really want to know who they are that much. I just want to see their characters coming through the screen. And it doesn't necessarily help me to know who the real person is. I like to be away from it all, the drama. I think that I have to make tough decisions. And if I get to know people and I like people or I know how hard it is to make a shot, that might influence me to maybe keep it when it shouldn't be in the movie. And I think it's good to have somebody in the final group that is not making decisions, does not have that experience, and is not making decisions with that experience as part of it. Because to me, I'm just looking at what comes out of the monitor. And I'm just saying, is the audience is this make the movie better for the audience or not as good for the audience, right? And that's a cold place to be sometimes, right? Like people can't believe it. Like I've had people say, you are brutal. And by the way, that's the PG version of what they really say. Okay.
I'm sure.
Right? Because I sometimes remove something that they were invested in, but I don't have that investment. I can't have that investment, whether it's a line of dialogue or a difficult shot or something. That is not, in my opinion, something I really want to have. Now, there are cases where it's helpful to be on location. If a director needs that kind of support. I've worked on some movies where it's a first-time director, and I just know like they're going to need more help than I can give them from my office 3,000 miles away. Then I'm your man. Like I can overcome those feelings and I can go there and help them. And I'm fine to do that. One of my favorite things to do, whether it be on location or remotely, is I like to work on Saturdays when they're shooting. And what I like to do is run cut footage and dailies with the director if they can do it. Like sometimes they're so busy and they're so exhausted that they need the time. But if they can do it, I think it's like great for them to get feedback and for us to start to collaborate, to talk about what they're going to shoot next week, to see what's working, to build off of what's working or not working, because we don't have dailies really anymore. We used to go every night to dailies and you talk to the director and the producer and you collaborate, right? So I've sort of replaced that with this Saturday. It's not even a whole work day. It's usually a 1 hour, 2 hour thing. I much prefer that than, say, just like posting stuff and getting an email back with thoughts, because that's one directional communication. And I'd rather start building a collaboration.
You have two very specific storytelling challenges to tackle with Black Adam. The first being that you're introducing a character for the first time. I mean, I guess to draw a parallel to the other comic book universe, this isn't the Avengers, this is Captain America. So you do have to do some context setting and you have to establish the character. The film opens with a brief origin story of sorts for Black Adam. And then when we do meet him in the present day, he doesn't really give us much right away. He's a fish out of water and a reluctant hero, doesn't do too much talking, doesn't give too much to the audience to relate to early on. And I'd like to know how you approach this aspect and how it might have evolved in the cutting room, introducing Black Adam and establishing him with the audience.
It was hard. It was hard.
That's a good answer.
Additionally to introducing Black Adam, we also have coming up right after that, we're introducing a whole lot of other characters. So I often joke that I spend my life working at the beginning of movies. I call it Reel 1, and the end of movies, Reel 6, right? I'm like, it seems like in the middle, like they go on a journey. But that introduction of characters, and especially, it's not just the introduction of characters, it's also the amount of exposition that you decide to tell. So look, on something like Black Adam, we had so many versions of Reel 1. We had versions where it barely had any information in ancient Kahndaq. You didn't even ever talk about Black Adam. And the first time we ever mentioned the crown or Black Adam or anything was like as you head to the mountain. And, the problem with that is it just wasn't giving people enough story to grab onto. So the trick to where we ended up, and I like where we ended up, was giving the audience enough exposition and enough of the character to pull them in. And then let the story develop and tell the rest of the story. So, look, there's a version where we could have told the entire Black Adam story from the beginning of, the Eternium being found till all the way until the wizards entombed him. You could have told all of that and then gone up to the mountain and unleashed him. But what we preferred to do was tease it a little bit and then let that fall throughout the rest of the movie. And the reason why we preferred to do that is we felt that there was a much bigger emotional impact when Black Adam told the story to Hawkman and completed the story, and you found out what Harut had done and who Harut was. And it was Black Adam telling the story, so it became very personal. And when it was in other places, it was incredibly expositional, and it didn't carry the emotion that we wanted to carry. So one of the things that is surprising people about Black Adam is how it resonates with families. And the family component of this movie, the father-son thread, was very important to us. And we wanted that to be a big part of this movie. And I can tell you, being one of the few human beings that's seen it without that thread, this is a much better movie this way, with it in there. So, that kind of balancing act is always tricky. Like, even if you go back to the comedies, the amount of exposition versus character development versus comedy is always a juggling act. So, in things like Superbad, we come out, we're going comedy, 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 comedy. And then about 25 minutes in, you realize, I've learned a little bit about these characters. You almost don't notice any of the exposition because it's covered in massive amounts of comedy. If you look at some of the 90s comedies, there was always this sort of 20 minutes where there might be only 3 jokes at the beginning of a movie. And like most of it was exposition, and you're just going, okay, here we're talking about, whatever, this is happening. And now finally a joke. Okay, I'll hang in the movie theater until we get to the good part, which is going to start at about 20 minutes.
So I mentioned that you have 2 very specific storytelling challenges, and you already alluded to the second one, and that is introducing the Justice Society. Very little is done to establish them or their backstories. It's just sort of like, here are these superheroes and this is what they're after. ultimately, why did you take that approach with the Justice Society where I'm not going to tell you too much up front. I'm going to keep the momentum of the film going. You know who Black Adam is now and you know what's at stake. Here we go.
So obviously it's a massive challenge because you're introducing, again, you have to do the introduction of Black Adam, and then you are introducing 4 characters. But by the way, additionally, you're also trying to establish Adriana, Iman, Kareem, the villain Ishmael, right?
Like, ton of characters.
It's a ton of new characters, and you don't know any of them. And look, there is a world where somebody could have said, okay, let's just make a Black Adam movie. And then they go, okay, now we're going to make, you can make 4 Justice Society movies, right? Because you can make a Dr. Fate movie, a Hawkman movie, a Smasher movie. And by the way, I would like it if they had done all those things because my job would have been much easier on this movie. But that was not the assignment and that was not the plan. And they wanted to do all this stuff. So basically, we needed to pick a lane of how much of these stories we were going to tell. And so there is a version where you would have spent maybe a half hour more time in the opening first 2 reels. And you said, you would have had a scene, maybe, this doesn't exist, by the way, other than in my mind, but maybe there's some scene where Uncle Al gives Smasher the suit and he puts it on and he smashes his head on the ceiling of the thing. Or there's like a robbery at a farmhouse and all of a sudden there's a cyclone and the barn disappears and the burglars revealed to the police or something, right? Like,
Mike, you got to write this down. I think you make a pretty good movie.
As you can see, I've never thought of any of this before. But here's the thing. We have an introduction where this guy comes out of the rock. The rock, Black Adam comes out of the rock. He kills an entire army and he's passed out in the desert. How long can you wait before he wakes up somewhere? You can't very long. So our thought was like, okay, if we can't do all those things at once, let's do a movie where by the end of the movie, you want to see more Dr. Fate. You want to see more Hawkman. You want to see more Cyclone. You want to see more Smasher. Now, some people love this. They were fine with it. Some people are like, yes. And they're begging for those movies, which is our goal. And some people are like, I hate this movie. They didn't give me any backstory. So we had to kind of pick a lane. And the lane we chose was for the movie-going experience. Because I can tell you this, if you saw the other movie, which we never had, but if you were to see that other movie, you'd be like, why is this taking so long? What's happening right now? Do I really need to know all this? There is kind of a third option where you do a version where you allude to some of these things a little more. You could have given a little more, but I think it's going to be great knowing what the Hawkman story can be. I think it's going to crush. It's a beautiful story. Knowing what Dr. Fate can be, it's going to crush. And I think like the setup for Smasher and Cyclone is in this movie, and they're kind of newer versions of those characters. And I think the JSA can have like a great world now. So yeah, we took some criticism for it a little bit, but we also entertained a lot of people with this style.
Something you said to me at the beginning of the interview, you said in talking to Jama that you identified things that were going to be difficult in the script. What were those? And ultimately, when you sat down to cut, were the things that you were concerned about things you really had to work on?
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty was the Black Adam backstory and when and how to tell it, because a lot of it was very early in the movie. And again, it wasn't through the point of view of Black Adam telling the story. And so we early on loved all the information, all the pieces of it. And I mean, I also never could have imagined he would have shot such beautiful, it's beautiful, like the footage in those flashbacks. I mean, I would have wished we could have had another 20 minutes of it in there, to be honest. Sometimes you can't put it all in. But it was how we were going to unfurl that. A lot of it was also how the interaction between Harut, Black Adam, and Iman was going to feel connected without feeling that we were being too overt with it. That was sort of the thing we identified because, a lot of times in any scripted version of any movie, it's very linear in its writing. And a lot of times in editing, we will bounce back and forth here and there. So mainly for us, it was like how we were going to reveal that, when we were going to reveal that, and again, what would give us the most emotional impact on that reveal. So it was about that emotion when he's talking to Hawkman. It was about the emotion when he's waking up and Harut is, encouraging him to save everybody. And also something we found during editorial was the emotion of connecting Black Adam and Hawkman at the end of the movie and having them work together. And that was something that developed through the process.
Internet lore is what it is. I never know if there's any fact to it or not. There was some talk about iterations you had to go through to get the film down to a PG-13, that it was a little darker for whatever reason. And so I'd just like to know what you had to do to ultimately get it from an R to a PG-13. What were the things that were sticking points that were blocking that?
There wasn't like all these whole scenes. Like, first of all, let me say something. Me, Mike, Sale, AC, I would love an R-rated Black Adam movie. Personally, I like those kind of movies. Actually, if I were going to make one, it wouldn't be this movie. Like, the R-rated version of this movie isn't as R-rated as you would want it to be. The things that we had to do, and we had to do some, but it was little trims. It was some blood in a few places. It was putting a shadow over something violent. It was taking off some frames here and there. There were a couple of places that were really fun that we had to kind of pull back on because they are fun. But if you're sitting there with a 13-year-old or, let's face it, a lot of parents they take kids who are 10 or 11. So I'm sure that's in the mind of the grown-up people who have to try to think about these things. I don't really have to think about these things too often. We had to make some little adjustments. Do I miss those things? Yes. I liked having them in. But I honestly think if this movie were R-rated, people would be like, why is it R-rated? But it was quite a bit of things that we had to trim. And I'm used to it because a lot of the comedies I work on, whether we're either trying to get a PG-13 or some of them, just trying to get an R rating, but we've had nudity and stuff in those. You have to work with the MPA to do that. And, they have a hard job where they can't really win all the time either because, on one side you have filmmakers and the other side you have people and families. And to me, this always felt like a PG-13 movie with the father and son storyline. It's not necessarily an adult storyline. So we were very committed to making it something that wouldn't feel awkward when you went to the movie with your kids.
I wanted to make sure that we talked about the music a little bit. When you have these imaginary times and places, there's not a lot of rules regarding needle drops. I mean, you've got everything from Smashing Pumpkins to the Rolling Stones to that yacht rock classic Baby Come Back, which you hit me with twice. Thank you. So let's talk about the origins of these tracks. Is it a playlist from Jama? Is it the music editor? Is it you just sitting there going, what do I want to have fun with now?
Well, different in different cases. The Baby Come Back, when they shot that scene, they shot like 3 or 4 different types of music, like sort of there was some punk music. There was he was in there going, maybe it was like Chili Peppers or something. I can't remember. There were different things. But as we sort of developed the character of Kareem, it became obvious that it was Baby Come Back. And if you notice, when in the first scene where he shows his license, he said he took the picture right after his girlfriend left him. So the Baby Come Back would probably be on his playlist because, he's upset about it. The Rolling Stones, I don't actually know where that came from. We had many, 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 many things that we tried in that Destroy the Army section of the movie. I probably showed Jama 10 different pieces of music in there. Some of the ones that everybody thought were going to be the ones early on, again, as we started watching the movie, they didn't quite blend in the movie. What we were looking for was something that was instantly recognizable to tell the audience that something violent was going to happen, but it was fun. But it was going to be fun, right? So because the thing is, he is a very violent character, but he's killing bad guys, and they're not they're kind of like goons. They're not like characters you really know, right? Like, so the idea is like, hey, we're going to be a violent movie, but this is going to be fun violence. It's a comic book movie. Enjoy it. So, you know, when you go too dark with that song, it's a whole different scene. And I remember like we had a punk version of Paint It Black where the guy is like screaming, you know, ah! and like in the song. And it was just like, oh God, like, like you're like, this is horrific. But the Stones' Paint It Black seemed to, for whatever reason, make audiences enjoy it and make us enjoy it.
So with these big superhero movies, you've got these amazing set pieces. You got so much action going on. And yet, as the editor, you're trying to create those threads, that connective tissue that builds a story to hold all that. And there are so many techniques at your disposal to do that. And there's a battle towards the end. And again, I won't give stuff away, but it's a showdown with the bad guy. I'll just call it that.
Sure.
And the line, don't let him sit on the throne. That one line really punches through because, again, you're cueing the audience. This is what's at stake here. This is what we're trying to stop from happening without laboring too much through the context stuff that would slow the whole scene down. That little piece there, and is that something you sort of threw in as an off-screen ADR line to help there? And are there often things like that you find you have to do to help build that structure to support those set pieces?
Yes. When you're dealing with like the fantastical, sometimes what happens is you start out with the desire to explain everything. But as you go down that rabbit hole, what you find is the more you talk about it, the more unbelievable it all becomes. Because all you got to do is keep asking the question, why? So like, we have to save him from getting to the throne. Why? Well, because when he sits on it, or how? When he sits on it, he's going to unleash the undead. How? Right? Like, so the more you go to try to make this believable, the more unbelievable it can sound. So if you were to say like prior to that scene on the ship, we would have spent a lot of time talking about that character and all the things he could do when he got there. It would, A, maybe it'd be less exciting when he did those things. But B, maybe you would be sitting there going, that can't happen. I don't believe in this. This is BS, right? So what we found is sometimes just the little nugget, which you happened upon and noticed as a nugget, can actually make it work. And actually to make Sabak work, if you go back and watch the movie again from the birth of Sabak, what you'll find is there's probably about 8 little nuggets along the way that tell and sort of lay the groundwork for what's going to happen in the last 20 minutes of the movie. And so what we did with that storyline is we sort of dispersed that information through several scenes.
You know, Easter eggs are always such a big part of these comic book movies. I don't know enough about the DC universe to ask, frankly, I don't know enough about the Marvel universe to ask Easter egg questions. But as a child of the 70s, as you say you are, is it just a complete coincidence that their van in the film looks just like the Mystery Machine from Scooby-Doo?
You know, I'm not sure it does. And it's so funny you say that because as I was researching all this, one of the things I went back and looked at in the bin, they had like the storyboarded version of the opening sequence. It wasn't like even previs. It was like drawings. And then it had like sound-alike actors doing the voices and the music and everything. And it actually sounded like Scooby-Doo to me. And there is a lighter version of those scenes, interestingly enough, where you could have like lighter music and you could have more jokes in there. And actually, I started out like making some of those scenes, but then, you know, what happens is there's so much intense stuff at the opening and at the Rock of Eternity that like it almost works as a governor to how much levity or lightness you could have on that way up there, right? So we chose a version that kept some darkness and mystery and then just had cream with a couple of little jokes through to really teach the audience, hey, we're going to also be funny in this movie in some places.
It was an absolute nod to the Mystery Machine from Scooby-Doo. You look just like it.
I will ask Jama if it was.
Please do. So, you know, anybody that listens to this podcast, they all agree that the editors are the real superheroes of any project. One of the fun things for Black Adam, one of the meta aspects is that superheroes need catchphrases. His is, tell them the man in black sent you. Mike Sale, ACE, what is your catchphrase?
My catchphrase is, I don't know how we're going to get there, but we're going to get there. And when we do, it's going to be awesome.
Well, that's a long one, but it works. Yes, we are all superheroes at heart. We all need a catchphrase. Mine is, "For the love of God, will you please subscribe to this podcast?" It's not that catchy, but it works for me. Something else that worked for me was talking to Mike about Black Adam. Loved his insight, loved his outlook, loved his energy. Hope you did too. Thank you, Mike Sale, for talking with us about your career and your work. Say, do you have a garage that you want to turn into a badass home edit suite like Mike? Well, first you got to start by moving the car out of the way. But once that's done, the next move is to get your hands on Avid Media Composer, which is even easier than moving the car. New tools, new features, new promos happening all the time. We are heading into the season of giving, you know. So give us both a break and head on over to avid.com to see what's new in Media Composer. You can also see how simple and affordable it is to subscribe to the most beloved creative tool set of feature film editors working out of their garage. There's a link in the show notes, as always, to help you on your way. And I am on my way, out the door. Show's over. You can stick around a little longer if you want, just lock up when you leave. Until next time, this is Matt Fury thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.